History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of Oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to this 580th episode of the History Goes Bump podcast, Ghost Tours for the Theater of the Mind. I am your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this episode, we're going over to the United Kingdom to a really old place. This was suggested by our listener, Riley Berkman, Thackray Medical Museum. This was once a workhouse, and boy, were these places horrible.
As horrific as it is, we always like examining old-time medical devices.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And not only are the medical devices horrid, but the workhouse was a horrid place to be too. So this has got all kinds of reasons for being haunted. We're looking forward to bringing that to you. But first, we want to welcome into the Spooktacular crew, Joni.
Thank you so much for joining our Facebook group.
And now this moment in Oddity.
The moment in Oddity was suggested by Michael Rogers. Both Mark Twain, aka Samuel Clemens, and Nikola Tesla are well-known people historically for different reasons. The pair actually became good friends. During a time of severe illness in the 1870s, Tesla read many of Mark Twain's early literary works during his recuperation. Tesla once stated about Twain's stories that they were, quote, so captivating as to make me utterly forget my hopeless state. In addition to being an American writer, Mark Twain was also very interested in technology with an emphasis on electricity due to his imaginative mind and his enthusiasm for all the possibilities of electricity. Twain invested financially in an electric motor in the 1880s. While Mark Twain was in New York in the 1890s, he and Tesla became friends. Due to Twain's interest in electricity and inventions revolving around it, he visited Tesla's inventor's lab often. Many photographs are searchable today to substantiate their friendship and mutual interests. One story that revolves around their friendship, however, takes a side path. Mark Twain was known to suffer from continual bouts of constipation, and Tesla was quite aware of his friend's distress. As the story goes, one of the inventions that Tesla had created was an electromechanical oscillator. It generated a high-frequency current with a vibrating plate. It was also called the earthquake machine due to its vibration level and noise. Tesla surmised that it could possibly alleviate Twain's constipation issues. It is said that Twain stood upon the vibrating plate of the earthquake machine for a couple of minutes, upon which he hurriedly stepped off the machine and ran to the restroom to relieve himself. Apparently, the vibrations had a laxative effect on Tesla's friend. The idea that causing a mini earthquake in the body could bring relief of constipation certainly is odd.
Shimmy the shizzle out of a stopped-up system.
Mort, I love that you're getting on the alliteration train.
Oh, brother.
It's getting dark in here. Anyone got a light? Whoa.
And now this month in history.
In the month of March, on the 31st in 1878, boxer Jack Johnson was born in Galveston, Texas. Johnson was the third of 9 children born to his freed parents who found work in the service industry. Although he grew up in the times of segregation, Johnson noted that where he lived, segregation was not an issue. Everyone was poor and experienced similar struggles. He recalled growing up with a gang of white boys where he never felt victimized or excluded. He played with them, had sleepovers, and ate meals in their homes. Jack's mother was influential in his life. When he was young, he was known as a coward. After coming home crying about being beaten up at school, his mother told them that if he got beat up at school again, she was going to whip him worse once he got home. Johnson learned that he needed to protect himself at that point. When Jack quit school, he began working local jobs to help support his family, eventually traveling to Dallas to work at a racetrack exercising horses. His next job was as an apprentice to a carriage painter named Walter Lewis. After work, Lewis enjoyed watching his friends spar. This sparked Johnson's interest in boxing, which he quickly excelled at. Jack would later state that his success in boxing was due to his friend Walter Lewis. Prize fighting was illegal in Texas. However, Jack managed to win his first prize of $1.50 at the age of 19. Wow, big money.
It was then.
Johnson made his professional debut on November 1st, 1898 in Galveston. He knocked out Charlie Brooks in the second round for the Texas State middleweight title. In February 1901, Johnson fought Joe Twain in Galveston. Johnson was knocked out in the third round, and due to prize fighting still being illegal in Texas, both men were arrested. Their bail was set at $5,000, which would be approximately $190,000 today in 2025 money.
Big amount.
Just for fighting? Holy cow. Neither of the boxers could afford the bail, so the sheriff allowed both men to go home at night as long as they agreed to spar in the jail cell. Crowds gathered for 23 days to watch the fights. At that time, their bail was reduced to a more affordable amount. However, the jury refused to indict either of the men. Moving forward, both Johnson and Choinsky remained friends. In February 1903, after winning more than 50 fights, Johnson won the World Colored Heavyweight Championship. Jack Johnson held the title for 2,151 days and is still considered one of the greatest defensive fighters of all time.
The Thackray Museum of Medicine in Leeds is the largest medical museum in the UK and takes guests on a journey through the history of medicine. There are exhibits about medical innovations and instruments, surgery in the 19th century, diseases and cures, and the uniforms worn by medical personnel. Monthly lectures are hosted on topics ranging from questionable quackery to bloody barbers and splattered surgeons.
Oh, sounds delightful.
This had been a former workhouse and is considered Leeds' most haunted building. Join us for the history and hauntings of the Thackray Medical Museum.
Leeds started as an Anglo-Saxon township located on the north bank of the River Aire. It was incorporated in 1626, and wool manufacturing at the time really put this city on the map. This progressed through the Industrial Revolution, and coal mining became a main industry, and engineering blossomed as well. The railway came during the Victorian era and made this a center of locomotive engineering. Many buildings built at this time still stand today. And since we mentioned these beautiful Victorian buildings, we really must go down a haunted and mysterious rabbit hole before jumping into the medical museum. Hello?
Hello?
We're down here in the rabbit hole.
And we've brought you with us.
3 of these buildings were designed by architect Cuthbert Broderick. We'll talk buildings and hauntings first, and then the man. The Leeds Corn Exchange is really something to see and is a round building with windows all around it. I love this building. It is so cool. It looks like a miniature coliseum if you really shrunk it down and then put a dome over the top of it.
Very cool.
The building housed exactly what it sounds like, a place to trade corn kernels. I can't believe they built this big thing so that you could go in and I don't know how you go about trading corn kernels hey, look at how cool this one is. You want it?
I'm betting that it's for different varieties of corn and they would exchange them so that they could grow different varieties.
Yeah, I guess, but a whole building dedicated to that is just bizarre.
Yeah.
There were only 3 of them in Britain. I'm surprised there were 3 of them, but there you go. The farming industry died out in the 1980s and the exchange closed, but today it is fully refurbished and hosts art shows, craft fairs, rum festivals, and is filled with stores run by various artisans. And it's haunted. An alley that leads to the rear of the exchange hosts the apparition of a woman wearing a shawl. We have no idea who she is, where she comes from, or why she's hanging out at the Corn Exchange.
Broderick also designed the building that is today the Leeds City Museum. It was built in 1862 as the Leeds Philosophical and Literary Society Museum. This ran for 100 years and then was taken over by the city of Leeds. It suffered severe damage during World War II, but remained open, eventually closing in 1965. The building was renovated and reopened as the Leeds City Museum in 2005. This is also a haunted location with reports of people hearing disembodied footsteps and doors opening and closing on their own. Strange light anomalies have been captured, and a ghostly figure has been seen on the balcony of Albert Hall. Ghost hunts are hosted by Paranormal Eye UK.
The Leeds Town Hall was Broderick's magnum opus that he designed when he was just 29 as part of a competition, which he won. The design was in the neoclassical Baroque revival style, and the town hall was completed in 1858. It was the tallest building in Leeds for over 100 years. The building features a Baroque clock tower. Queen Victoria opened it herself during a lavish ceremony. This originally housed courts, a council chamber, public hall, and offices. Today it serves as a concert, conference, and wedding venue. The Great Hall is now called the Victoria Hall and is extraordinary, with large columns capped by gilt capitals, cut glass chandeliers, and it had the largest organ in Europe when it opened. It's been described like being inside a wedding cake, and when you look at pictures, it really does give that feel.
Very cool.
A marble statue of Queen Victoria stands at the vestibule. A woman did most of the carving work and sculpting on the building, Catherine Maurer, with help from her nephew. This building has a variety of hauntings going on. There are sculptures of lions outside that are pretty worn, and perhaps that is because legends claim they come to life on occasion, when the clock strikes 13 for some reason, or if someone runs around the building in the time it takes for the clock to strike 12 times. I imagine you're probably hallucinating after you've run around this huge building 12 times, so then you do see lions coming to life. I don't know. The clock sometimes won't strike midnight, and that is because the ghost of a woman named Mary Blythe, who threw herself from the clock tower in 1876, apparently haunts it. An executed criminal named Charlie Peace haunts the town hall, too.
What made Broderick unusual was that he seemed to come out of nowhere at the age of 29, and before he was 45, he disappeared. He was one of the most celebrated architects of his time, and he just disappeared. He would never design another building, and some thought that he exited the scene because his designs were no longer popular, because they were considered reckless extravagance, with the town hall costing more than 4 times its original budget to build. He also loved France and incorporated many Frank elements in his designs, and Britain was paranoid at the time about Napoleon III's intentions, so they weren't keen on French designs. Broderick apparently fled England for France and took along his lover of 15 years, Margaret Chatham, who was 7 years older than him and married with 4 children. This affair might also be a reason why work dried up for him. Broderick lived in obscurity after that, until his death at 83 in 1905.
Well, that was an interesting little rabbit hole.
Indeed.
I thought
probably the longest one we've ever done.
Yeah, I think the listeners probably found that interesting. I just found these 3 buildings that were really extraordinary that are in the heart of Leeds here, that are all from the Victorian era, and they were designed by the same guy. So I was like, oh, and then I saw that there's some mystery surrounding him. He just disappears and goes into obscurity after all of this grandiose building and fame and everything like that. I think he just wanted a quiet life maybe after that.
Definitely mysterious, but another mystery here is how in the world are we going to get out of here?
That is a good question. Kelly, it's still the Victorian era down here in the hole, and I noticed over there's some weird-looking devices. It's some kind of gym equipment that was designed by Dr. Gustav Zander.
Are you sure? They look more like torture devices.
They do kind of look like they would be used for torture.
Well, wait, that one has like a catapult kind of looking thing to it.
Yeah, I think it's for doing shoulder work or something, but it's got enough of a spring kind of effect. I think if you MacGyvered it, you could get us out of here.
Well, luckily I do have my duct tape.
Well, then we're set. Oh, you did a great job with this, Kelly. You go first.
Oh, sure. I'm the guinea pig. All right, here we go.
Oh, wait a minute. There's a ladder over here. Hey, Kelly, I found a ladder.
Thanks, Diane.
So the same year that the Leeds Town Hall was built, the building that houses the Thackray Medical Museum was built. This was originally known as the Leeds Union Workhouse, and it was the largest workhouse in Britain. Workhouses were opened in Britain starting back in the 1600s to house the poor, infirm, and mentally ill. These weren't a place of salvation. They were places of misery. Everything was taken from people and families were split up. Hard labor greeted them. To give the listeners an idea of how the poor were treated and thought of, there is the 1797 survey about the poor in a workhouse in Leeds that I found. And keep in mind that they used to call the people in here inmates. There are 154 inmates in the workhouse, of whom 42 are old and infirm men or lunatics, 56 women, many of them soldiers' wives, and 56 children, mostly under 12. There are a few cripples or idiots between 12 and 20. Children are generally bound apprentices at 9 or 10. This kind of reminds me of what Ben Franklin, maybe that's what he was, a bound apprentice, so you can't, leave or do your own thing. The workhouse is an old building in the town with accommodation for 200 persons. There are about 20 beds in each room, chiefly of flocks, and provided each with 2 blankets and a rug. Some beds have sheets. Well, great.
Good grief.
I guess I had blankets, so. The dormitories and other apartments are kept with great neatness, and the poor are well-dressed, clean, and orderly. The house is whitewashed and the bedclothes scoured once a year. Once a year?
Lovely.
Bedclothes cleaned once a year. Wonderful, yes.
Lice. Mites.
Table of diet. Breakfast every day, milk pottage and bread. Dinner Sunday, they'd have mutton, potatoes, broth, bread, and at least some beer. So
Okay.
Let's get some beer. Monday and Friday, it was rice, milk, bread, and beer. Tuesday was flour, dumplings, and beer. Wednesday, bread, cheese, and beer. Thursday, potatoes, broth, bread, and beer. Friday, rice, milk, bread, and beer. Saturday, drink pottage and bread. Supper Sunday, bread and broth. Thursday, bread and broth or beer only. Other days, milk pottage and bread. Of wheaten cake, 3 pounds are divided into 8 parts. And then there's some rice that they throw in there. They get a little bit of pepper and salt and cloves. Each adult has 14 ounces and each child 8 ounces of paste for dumplings. 20 persons have 1 gallon of milk for milk pottage, and each person has 1/3 of a quart of beer at dinner except on Saturdays. Adults have 6 ounces of cheese each, children 4 ounces. At Easter and Whitsuntide, veal and bacon are provided for dinner and roast beef at Christmas, and at each of these seasons, each pauper receives 1 pound of spiced cake. In general, the stores, when delivered, are carried up to the lodging rooms, number 24. However, of the rules observed in the workhouse adopted on May 9, 1771, requires that all the poor in this house who are able to attend prayers sit decently at their meals, avoid talking, and make no attempt to go out of the dining room till thanks are returned, and in default of any of these particulars to lose their next meal. So you better sit decently, Kelly, or you're going to lose your next meal.
Good grief. No elbows on the table.
And number 29 provides for the punishment of any person carrying any bread, cheese, or other provisions without leave from the master out of the common dining room. It is but justice to add that Mr. Lindsley, the master of the workhouse, is in every respect highly qualified for the very arduous and complicated duties of his important office, in the discharge of which he has happily been able to render those under him contented without permitting them to be idle, and to provide for their wants without losing sight of economy. His human disposition and firm, even temper make him beloved, respected, and obeyed with cheerfulness, and what is seldom to be met with in houses of this description, the poor under his care live in perfect harmony among themselves. Their earnings amount to about £150 a year, exclusive of work performed for the immediate use of the house.
That last part sounded like a fluff piece.
Yeah, I'm like, they just really love the guy, and everything's just wonderful. And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
By the late 1840s, the workhouses in Leeds were overwhelmed, particularly with the Irish running from the Great Famine. It was decided to build a new workhouse, and this was begun in 1858 and finished in 1861. The Leeds Union Workhouse was designed by William Perkin and Elisha Backhouse, and located next to the Leeds Moral and Industrial Training School. The house had a main block with a dining hall and kitchen, infirmary, chapel, and what they called idiotic wards. A bigger infirmary was added in 1872 and a nurse's home in 1893.
And what kind of work was required in these workhouses? To me, Kelly, it reminds me of these Russian gulags with rock breaking.
Oh my.
Here I found a description of what happens to one of the poor people who were brought here to the workhouse. It says, to the confirmed tramp, and that's what they're calling them, the Society of Kindred Souls is a great attraction of the ordinary vagrant ward. Here, however, the adoption of what is known as the cell system prevents communication. On his arrival, the tramp gets a bath, a luxury which he does not always appreciate. His dormitory is a clean cell lined with white glazed bricks and fitted up with a hammock. On the opposite side of a passage running through the suite of cells is a stone-breaking cell, in which he is obliged to break a certain quantity of stone in consideration of his night's shelter and food. The board are about to adopt the two-night system, and for the care and attention bestowed upon him, he will have to account for at least 1,200 weight of stone, and there is no shirking of the work either. The stones have to be put through a perforated iron plate, and the size of the perforation is an adequate guarantee that the stones have been reduced to sufficiently small pieces. Not all the nomads are required to break stones. For a gentleman of delicate constitution or more refined upbringing, there's the alternative of woodcutting and oakum picking. Women tramps, too, are set to the latter kind of work. That is accommodation for 44 males and 14 females with separate entrances. A large one-story labor shed has also been built at the rear of the vagrant block for the purposes of woodcutting and other general work. I mean, to me, that sounds like exactly what you would be doing in a Russian gulag. Go over there and break some rocks and keep breaking them until they're really small. And what is the purpose of that?
I don't know.
I mean, at least if they were making clothes or something that would contribute to society, I don't understand what breaking rocks does.
Well, maybe creating DG, like gravel for pathways or something.
Yeah, I guess.
A modern project called More Than Oliver Twist sought to bring to light that the inmates at the Leeds Union Workhouse were much more than Oliver Twist dressed in rags asking for another bowl of gruel.
Please, sir, may I have another?
One of the inmates they have researched was named Josiah Hardy. He spent a lot of time in actual prison for what were deemed pauper-related offenses. Two of these included disorderly pauper refusing to work and disorderly pauper destroying his own clothes. When he was at the Leeds workhouse, he was 30 years old, had no education, and was 5 foot 5.5 inches tall with brown hair. Another inmate was Mary Piddleston, who was born in Ireland as Mary Ann McCann. She married a Grenadine guard named John Piddleston, and they had one daughter. They traveled to Portugal and Canada, and John retired in 1850 at the age of 57. Everything was fine until John died in 1873, and his pension stopped. Mary was left in poverty, and she had to move to the Leeds Union Workhouse, where she died in the Union Infirmary in 1886.
In 1915, the Leeds Union Workhouse was offered as a place for sick and wounded soldiers during World War I and renamed the East Leeds War Hospital. Most of the wounded came from the battlefront in France. Later, this would become St. James's Hospital, part of Europe's largest teaching hospital, before the Thackray Museum of Medicine moved in and opened in 1997. The museum is named for medical supplies manufacturer Paul Thackray, and this is his lasting legacy. The medical supply trade was a family business that was already successful when Paul was born in 1939. Paul's grandfather, Charles F. Thackray, started the business in 1902 as a corner pharmacy. Charles not only provided medicine, but he also had a forge in the back where he could make instruments and repair them. Can you imagine a pharmacy with a forge in the back? Give me those
Very
scissors.
cool.
I'll fix them. The shop sat across from Leeds General Infirmary, making it all about location, location, location. Paul's dad, Noel, and Uncle Todd took over the business. The company continued to thrive until Paul sold it in 1990. He had been an avid collector of many things, and much of that collection included medical products. Paul also loved the history of pharmacy and medicine. When St. James's Hospital closed, Paul decided it would be perfect for a museum, and the Heritage Lottery Fund awarded him a £3 million grant. And as we said, the museum opened in 1997. Paul was very involved in the day-to-day running of the museum until his death in August 2023, so he just died pretty recently. He donated thousands of dollars and thousands of items. The Thackray Museum of Medicine welcomes more than 60,000 visitors a year, with over 75,000 pieces in their collection. And I did want to mention, since we're talking about the Victorian period and different medical contraptions and stuff that they used back then, I have been following Dr. Lindsay Fitzharris for years, and she has some great stuff. She has a book out there called The Slaughtering Art. She has another one that talks about an early plastic surgeon who was fixing the faces of men who came back from the war that had been, their faces had been shattered.
Oh, wow.
And he fixed them and stuff. So I encourage you guys to check her out. She's a medical historian, full of great information. It's Dr. Lindsay Fitzharris, and it's Lindsay with an E before that Y.
The museum is known for its shocking and macabre displays. Disease Street introduces visitors to the slums of Leeds during the Victorian era with sights, sounds, and smells.
Yes, smells. Isn't that wonderful? I can only imagine what that smelled like during the Victorian era.
The Victorian Operating Theatre and Mortuary shares what surgery would have been like in the pre-anesthetic era, and the surgery that is reenacted is the amputation of a child's leg after an industrial accident. We hear the video is pretty graphic.
Supposedly this museum is child-friendly, and they have school kids come here all the time, and I'm like, wow, okay.
There is an exhibit called Disease Detectives that shares the stories of discoveries about microbes and the cures for infections like penicillin. And there are countless medical instruments. One of the items is a vapocresylene vaporizer that used a byproduct of coal tar that was mixed in a sticky liquid that was vaporized over a lamp lit by kerosene. There is no proof that this ever worked, but the claim was that it helped with colds, coughs, bronchitis, pneumonia, and whooping cough. This was used from the 1880s to the 1950s.
I'm thinking coal tar for the lungs? I don't know. Did nobody hear about black lung disease or anything like that? Usually coal and lungs are not things you put together. There's so much great stuff here, Kelly. Here we've got belladonna, or as most people probably know, deadly nightshade. This was used for colic, motion sickness, asthma. Great. I would love to try some deadly nightshade for my asthma.
Oh, no.
It was a painkiller, and some women put drops of it in their eyes to dilate their pupils because it made them look doe-eyed.
Oh, my.
That usually led to blindness. Most people know that syphilis was treated with mercury early on, which didn't do anything but harm the patient, but in the 1910s, salvarsan was discovered and became a magic bullet for treating the sexually transmitted disease. There is a metal statue nicknamed Norman that was created in 1665 by Angelo Carlesco and represents all the supports and correctional devices used at the time to help the human body. It's basically a human body formed out of metal. How about a tobacco enema pipe?
How about no?
You could, Kelly, you could literally blow smoke up someone's derriere with this instrument made in the 1860s. And this was a stimulant used to revive people who seemed to have died, like after someone drowned.
What?
Yes, let's revive them by blowing smoke up there. It also treated hernias and constipation, apparently. So let's go back to our moment in Oddity. Mark Twain didn't need an earthquake device. He just needed smoke blown up, as you know what.
I'd rather get on the earthquake machine, thank you very much.
This was very popular during the Victorian era for some reason. I don't know. Did it ever actually revive anyone? I want to know. Is there a story that, yes, wow, that person, woke right up out of that drowning?
And I wonder if that's where the term came from, blowing smoke up your ASS.
I have a feeling this is exactly where that term came from. So, Kelly, I just went to Snopes here really quick, and apparently those two things do not go together. Tobacco enemas and blowing smoke up someone's derriere, those sayings don't go together. The saying came about in the 1960s, so I don't know where they got it from.
Interesting. I'm kind of shocked, actually.
I am, because it seems like those two things would go together, but...
It is said that the museum is rife with paranormal activity. Some of the energy seems to be quite dark. I'd be quite dark if I had tobacco smoke blown up my bum.
Yeah.
While other experiences act like a poltergeist. Guests claim to get poked by someone they can't see, and they have felt cold spots that are chilly enough to cause people to shiver. There are claims that a gray lady wanders the hallways in a Victorian dress, and that a ghost doctor has been seen by other people, particularly in the display called Disease Street. A staff member heard something metal hitting the floor, and when she investigated, she found a coin on the floor. The coin was found to have come from a display that was not open to the public, and no one could explain how a locked cabinet hidden away in the back could have a coin removed from it.
An employee was supervising during a ghost hunt one evening, and she set herself up in the gift shop after sending the ghost hunting group off on their own. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps coming up the corridor towards her, and she assumed a participant was looking for the bathroom. She stuck her head out into the hall to provide guidance and saw that no one was there. She was stunned because the footsteps had been really loud, and she was positive someone was coming towards her. A cleaning lady was cleaning one evening when she saw somebody up on the third floor, and she went over to another employee and asked for help in rounding up the person who shouldn't be in the building. They searched everywhere and found no one. The cleaner thought about it later and was positive that the person had been wearing a long white coat. Did she see the ghost of a doctor? Yvette Fielding and the Most Haunted team visited the museum during season 13 in 2015, and I feel like Yvette Fielding is the counterpart to Zach Bagans with the drama and stuff like that. Paranormal investigator Jason Osterfield told Yvette that they had got a lot of activity on Disease Street that included nose pictures like perfume and a bad stench, which, they do pump in scents there, so I don't know that was something paranormal. disembodied voices, and strange noises. A male in 18th century dress has been seen walking through the area as well. Yvette was told that there's a dark entity in a certain area of Disease Street and that school children do not like going into that area. But also some staff don't like that area either. While doing an initial tour or walkthrough, Yvette and a couple other people heard a knock in a room that is set up like an apothecary with a bunch of small vases that medicines had been stored in. They asked for whatever had just knocked to knock twice to acknowledge that they had done the knock, and they got 2 knocks in response. 2 of the guys were wandering an old part of the building in this underground area. It looked like some kind of tunnel system down there. I'm not sure exactly. You could clearly hear a metallic ping, like something had been thrown that was metal. Kelly, I kind of sounded to me like, if you have like a long strip of metal and it's just a little one and it bounces off of a brick wall. That's kind of what it sounded like to me.
Gotcha.
And there was a bunch of debris on the floor, so it was kind of hard for them to be like, oh, that's it there. That's what caused it. But you could clearly hear that ping sound. Yvette and a group heard an audible whisper, and this is they're coming through this hallway, and they come into this room, and just as they come into the room, Yvette kind of goes, oh, I thought I just heard something whisper. And then 3 other people in the group also said, yeah, I heard a whisper too, because she was trying to make sure nobody was whispering or anything. They were like, no, and I heard the same thing. They caught an EVP where Yvette asks, can you hear my voice? And there's an answer, yes, I am listening. They got some interesting evidence, I thought. And then lastly, there might be a witch here.
Mary Bateman's body was given to Leeds Infirmary for dissection after she died, and this skeleton has been loaned to the museum. It seems that her spirit is connected to the skeleton still. Mary was born in Lazenby to a couple of farmers. She got a lot of exposure to traveling fortune tellers and such, so she learned a bit about that. When she was an adult, she moved to Leeds and worked as a dressmaker with the side hustle of telling fortunes. The fortune telling proved to be quite lucrative, so she focused on that full time. She married a man named John Bateman in 1793. Shortly after that, she started stealing from other tenants in their building and was eventually found out. Mary told John his dad was dying, so she could get him out of her hair, and she sold all of his stuff so she could pay back the people she stole from. She dove into a life of fraud after this, begging for charity on the street for others, and then she would keep the money.
Yeah, so she pretended like she was working for some kind of a charity and said, do you have anything for these people, alms for the poor? I'm going to give it to them, and then she would just put it in her pocket.
Terrible.
Mary claimed she could ward off evil spirits and would get people to pay her to do just that, but she had no powers whatsoever. But her chicken might have had some special powers, or at least that's what Mary claimed. She told people that her chicken was a prophet and the egg she laid contained predictions. And sure enough, the chicken would lay an egg that predicted Jesus was coming soon. Eventually it was found out that Mary scratched the messages in the egg, shoved it back up into the chicken,
Oh my gosh.
and waited for it to be laid again.
Oh, that's terrible.
So let's just say animal cruelty was part of her thing too.
Yeah.
Then why not move into the next thing you could do? Mary went on to start killing people and stealing all their stuff and was caught and put on trial in March of 1809 at York Castle. She was found guilty and sentenced to hang 3 days later, which did occur. And since the skeleton has ended up on display at the museum, people claim that the spirit of Bateman roams the halls, so hold on to your wallets. Apparently her skin was sold in pieces too, Kelly, to help ward off evil spirits.
Ew. Life in the workhouses was pretty awful. Care in the hospital here was pretty awful too. It's not hard to believe that some energy that isn't exactly positive could have found a home here. Even the medical equipment could carry the emotional energy connected to its use. Is the Thackray Medical Museum haunted?
That is for you to decide. Well, it would definitely be an interesting place for us to go check out. Talk about bottles of old medical stuff. I would be in heaven there. And I love looking at these old medical devices and being quite thankful that we don't go through that anymore.
True.
As somebody who suffers from kidney stones, I was perusing Dr. Fitzharris's website, and in one of them, she had a procedure where they were taking a bladder stone out of a person. And this was, of course, pre-anesthesia. It was a very large stone, and the guy screamed for 45 minutes through the whole thing and then died the next day. So I was like, thank you for modern medicine.
I bet.
Something else we could be thankful for is our website. We'd love people to go check it out over at historygoesbump.com. And if you'd like to send us some feedback, you can do that at historygoesbump@gmail.com. or leave comments at any of our various social media. We love that. Kelly, we hit 5,000 over at YouTube. Thank you for subscribing to the show. We're very excited to have 5,000 of you over there. If
Yes,
you
indeed.
like what you see or hear over there, please give the videos thumbs up. It does help us with the algorithm. And we love your comments as well.
Yeah, and any locations where you're listening to the podcast, if they have a like button, please smash it.
And we love your reviews. Want to thank you guys for joining us on this episode. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you by our executive producers.
You can find History Goes Bump on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Google Play, and anywhere you can listen to podcasts.
And we are
Rolling?
rolling, rolling, rolling.
Oh boy.
Get your doggies rolling, rawhide.
Well, Mark Twain was... Train?
Mark Twain. He's
Choo-choo.
riding on the train.
Chicka, 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 chicka.
Leeds started as an Anglo-Saxon township located on... This is what happens when your tongue gets stuck to the top of your mouth, and I can't even say stuck right.
That happens like at the back of my tongue, which is extra weird.
I don't know what my problem is today.